This is going to be some ladder games I just played. Playing some real cheesy strategies now because I'm actually working on a new thing with my practice, which I have, if you look here, unbound my select all army key. So I'm working now on making sure that I hotkey units when I make them, and it should, over the long haul, give me better army control because I'm not always F2ing and screwing up and losing my units, getting them all out of position. I could leave things on watchtowers now where that's relevant, all that sort of stuff. But I'm initially just doing some cheeses because it gives me lots of reps. So you might say, well, how do you call hatch first in a Zerg versus Zerg a cheese? It's an all-in. I make a whole bunch of Zerglings. I don't have a follow-up. I'm literally just using this hatchery to make more units. I'm not using it as a base. I think I make one, maybe two drones here. I turn one of them into a baneling nest. That's the extent of what I'm doing. I'm not sure why my opponent has two gas geysers this early in ZVZ. That seems not correct. So yeah, I've got a couple drones there. Make one into the baneling nest, and then it's just non-stop army from this point on. Okay, so they're making roaches. I am still not understanding this other gas. Alright, so I've been sending my overlords out to try to spot where they have units moving. I end up catching a couple over there, have some of mine over here. I get outnumbered a little bit badly there because I did go hatch first, so they were able to make Zerglings earlier than I was. So I end up killing some things down here, but it's okay. I morphed the banelings on the ramp. I think this is going to buy me enough time to get more Zerglings out. They eat some really bad baneling hits too. And yeah, that gives me enough time to pull up more Zerglings. Okay, let's put this back to a more reasonable speed of the game. So now we've got roughly even numbers of Zerglings. I've had the second hatchery longer, so I have a queen hitting the injects for longer, even though my queen died here. Just making another one to replace it. Let's see, I actually squeezed out a couple extra workers in the early game too, which means I'm going to be able to outproduce my opponent here. This could still be a drone, this could still be a drone, and then we'd be on more even supply, more even worker count, and that would be better for my opponent. Didn't quite get my queen out of there in time. Fortunately, I get just in time to save her, but ideally I would pull her back a little bit quicker than that. Just getting used to the new hotkeying everything. So you'll see a couple times I have Zerglings standing around here. This is because I didn't hotkey from their eggs like I'm supposed to. But that's okay, it just means it's waves of Zerglings. I also didn't realize this until very late in this game. I did not get Zergling speed somehow. That's as soon as my second hatchery finishes, always 100% of the time, every game, and yet I somehow didn't get it this game. So I'm thinking at some point, wow, my Zerglings are taking a long time to get across the map. I wonder why that is. Oh, I never got Zergling speed. I pulled them up here. This is kind of bad if my opponent has banelings. Fortunately, they never do this game. This is way too grouped up and clumped up against a baneling. One baneling, maybe two banelings gets this entire army. But I never saw that this game. So I just kept making Zerglings forever. Kept attacking. I want to make sure I get rid of the queen so I can have a pretty good idea. I'll keep outproducing my opponent because I'm going to hit my injects at my bases, which means I'll have more larvae to work with. I keep sending in small waves of Zerglings. I really need to stop them outside the base, like maybe over here, and get them in a bigger group to make this attack more effective. And maybe ideally also send up a couple first because I don't want banelings to blow up and destroy all of them. See, I finally started Zergling speed up there. Went over to see if my opponent had third. They did not, so I wanted to make sure I cancel that. Especially since I've killed the queens, I'm just making sure that my production is staying ahead there. At some point, though, they killed my baneling nest with that original attack too, so I went over here thinking I was going to morph some banelings, but I didn't actually have a baneling nest finished again yet. So I re-engaged with slightly more Zerglings than I had previously been doing. Still maybe ideally wait for this group right here to get there. But yep, the accidentally slow Zergling all-in works. Taking tons of gas here because I had no Baneling Nest for the longest time, plus I didn't get the speed on the Zerglings on time. But eventually that's just it. My opponent says GG and leaves. Play another one that's another ZVZ in much the same vein, where we make just all-lings all the time. Let's see. So I'm blue in this one. Alright. So again, I'm going hatch first. I so rarely see things like 13-12s on the ladder that it's fine to just go hatch first and accept I'm losing to that build. Although even the last time I saw a 13-12, my opponent didn't execute it very well, so I ended up holding their aggression. But that's just not a thing I've been seeing. Or there's this, I think, 15-14 sort of build where they look like they are just macroing a thing up and then make a whole bunch of Zerglings. But that one's slow enough that you can defend it with this build anyway. You just have to keep an eye on what your opponent is actually doing. Yeah, it looks like we both decided that early hatcheries are okay here. My opponent's spawning pool is an really weird place for Zerg versus Zerg, because this can get surrounded if you don't have Banelings by it at all times. Spine crawlers normally mean you're not going to be attacking anytime soon. This is again a strange place for it. Normally you'd put that down at the bottom of the ramp with your Baneling Nest. Like you put your Baneling Nest in front of your hatchery, you put a spine crawl, and then you can kind of jam a queen into space there so it can't get surrounded by Zerglings easily. So I send my Zerglings over here to pull them up. I actually want to wait until I have Banelings, and I realized this before I move in. Or at least I want speed to be done. I think that's what I was actually waiting on there. Yeah, it's a future time because my Baneling Nest is clearly not done. Moving a little bit, see, okay, they have several drones here, so this is probably not super all-in from them, but there's still actually quite a few Zerglings here too. See, that's a more normal place to have your spine crawler down at the bottom of the ramp. Because tends to be a lot of fighting with Zerglings and Banelings up in this area. So now I did morph in Banelings. I have actually queued those up to go separate directions, try to hit some Zerglings and some workers if I can. Get in here with all the follow-up Zerglings. See, wow, that pool's in a strange place. So that ends up being all for that one, because my opponent was trying to make drones when I was making Zerglings. Then I play a little bit of a different cheese here against a random player. They end up being Protoss, but I don't know that. They even ask me if I want me to tell what race they're playing. So I'm doing my normal build here of hatch on 17, then gas on 18, and then pool on 18. This one is a slightly later cheese. It's about getting Hydralisks and Zerglings. You don't get the Baneling Nest, and you don't get any upgrades other than the speed upgrades. So you're pretty behind if this goes into a macro game, but it's designed to win the game with about 50, just over 50 workers. I think it makes slightly too many Zerglings early in the game, so I delay my push a bit, but ends up being alright because I do trade with a lot of their early units. I get down here, I just catch that probe before the drone turns into a hatchery. So now I know my opponent's playing Protoss, because this was random that I was playing against. So that early probe kind of means I need to look and see if I'm getting cannon rushed. And I do start a pull out of order because I want Zerglings early if I am getting cannon rushed, or possibly I need a Roach Warren earlier if I'm getting cannon rushed. So I end up changing the order on my hatcher or on my pool and my gas, but it still normalizes into the same sort of game that I want to play after I'm sure I'm not getting cannon rushed, which is you make your Zergling speed, then your next 100 gas you make a layer, then you drone up to about 51 to 55, somewhere in that neighborhood. and attack with Hydralisks and Zerglings. Just you attack once the Hydralisk speed upgrade finishes. Ideally, like right when it finishes, but if you're one round of Hydralisks later, that's okay too. At least it was in this game. I don't know how true that is in some other games. Making my queens. Saw okay, my opponent's not cannon rushing me, so I didn't do anything else other than change the order I built the spawning pool and the gas differently. I did send an overload over to the what I would say is my 4th base or 5th base to see if there was a proxy pylon going up there. The probe hung out there for a while to see if I was taking that base, but then left because I wasn't. Get over here, see, okay, they just have an expansion going down, but that's good news for me because that means they're likely not attacking me soon with anything except maybe 2 adepts that they might have made early. So I did move my Zerglings across the map and 2 and 2 instead of all 4 together, so that's a little bit bad. So they end up meeting the Zealot there in the middle of the map, or the Adepts in the middle of the map, and they just get 2 of them for free, and I think they managed to chase down the other 2 for free as well. So I do end up making more Zerglings when I see the Adepts, because I need to make sure to not take too much damage in my mineral line. I've already got another queen on the way at the natural. I'm a little bit late starting my layer here because I see I've got over 100 gas already, but that's because I'm defending this attack from the Adepts. But I really should have that started. I really should be trying to take a 3rd now to do this build actually efficiently. So I put a lot of damage on the Adepts down at the natural. They're like 1 or 2 attacks from my queen once they get up here. So they ended up getting some workers. They got 3 workers. Ideally you lose 0 to that, but 3 workers isn't exactly game ending either. I did make maybe a few too many Zerglings, but I decided I'm going to counterattack with them because there's no sense in making them and having them stand at home. It's also helping me practice my army hotkeying, that I hotkeyed the things from the eggs. Okay, that's a pretty late 3rd base. This really should have been down about a minute ago. And my layer is getting there. You only get 3 gas in this build because you don't actually ever mine enough resources to be able to spend more than that. You need to win or at least do significant damage before anything else. Like, you can transition if you do a lot of damage. So here I have my Zerglings attacking the hatchery, but I have them attack move not at the Nexus. I don't quite have them attack moved on the Nexus, so they end up going over and engaging some of the army units there. So it only ends up half killing this Nexus, when if I had done it differently, maybe they could have. See, I don't think these got... No, I guess they did. I just never actually issued another attack command since those got hotkeyed. But see, I end up doing like half damage to the Nexus here. Where if I had actually attack moved on the Nexus, I think I could have destroyed it. But they ended up fighting some units here instead. I'm still sending more Zerglings because I just want to keep my opponent at home. I didn't realize I attack moved them on the plate during the game, so I end up destroying that plate for no reason when they could be fighting the units or the buildings that actually matter. Some Phoenixes out there. One thing I can do is try to work on spreading my overlords a little bit more. So with the new hotkeys, I'm losing a little bit of the map vision that I've been practicing, so I got to get back to doing that. What I can do is when I make overlords, like right-click them to their position that they want to go, and then not have them just all being right here in the front of my natural at the rally point. But I see I must have not quite hotkeyed some of these when they came out. So I'm still moving out. I'm getting the Hydralisk upgrade right now. I want to attack right when that's done or very shortly thereafter with a bunch of Hydralisks and Zerglings. So I'm just going to put my Zerglings over here in a place to meet up with my Hydralisks so I can get all my army together at once to attack, and this also denies this 3rd base. So these Phoenixes are going around hunting overlords, but fortunately for me, since I didn't put them on the map, they're not dying, but that's still bad. Ideally, I have them out there for the vision. I do spend a little bit too much of this game supply blocked. Not right now, but that was happening quite a few times earlier.
A new queen has emerged.
Just making sure I hit my injects. Making sure I'm making hydralisks as much as I can. You want to get like 20 or so hydralisks to make them be enough to have sort of like a death volley kind of army, because they will have a really high damage output. They're bad against storm. They're bad against like certain splash damage things. Like Archons are pretty good against them too. Also, all my units are light, so adepts do chew through my army pretty fast. But hydralisks have such a high damage output that if you have enough of them, the adepts won't matter. So Phoenix did come in and pick up a drone. I don't know if they actually ended up killing that. Yeah, I guess they got the one drone there. You can see though I have my army all over the map because I'm hotkeying them directly from the egg, so there's constant movement on the map, which is definitely a plus that I'm seeing from having unbound my F2. One thing I do need to do is to make sure when I make my overseer, actually add it to its army group, or right click it on one of the units.
Mineral field depleted.
So I get my hydralisks up here. I want to attack with them and the Zerglings together as one force. So I get that set up to basically go, oh, my opponent's wall has a hole in it. So I run my Zerglings through it. That pulls that army out of position. I realize in a second that I need to destroy the pylon that's in my way and right-click it with my hydralisks for a couple of attacks. There we go. I keep sending the streams of Zerglings into the worker line just to be somewhere other. So you see my opponent doesn't have Storm yet, so they made 2 of their High Templars there into an Archon. I don't have a follow-up. I have no attack or defense upgrades. I don't have a Hive going down. I don't have anything like that. So this is a very all-in build. This is doing enough damage I probably could transition into a longer game. Like I set up things to do that just in case. Like I see I'm building an evolution chamber there. But that's really about it. My opponent is actually just going to be dead to this because I have enough of an army. They also managed to get their Archons stuck with their pylon back there. It's going to be a little bit long to be called a cheese game, but since there is no follow-up, yeah, it's a cheese. And my opponent will say something to that effect here in a minute. Yep. Seems pretty cheesy. And they're right. It was a cheese. So this is also a little bit of practicing that I'm making sure that I get my army set up right. Another thing I've done with my hotkeys is I've changed so that I don't have a create control group any longer at all. It's all add and steal. So every time I make a control group, it will add new units to whatever I want. So like I make eggs and the default binding is like control and whatever number you want. And I have made it so now the control and whatever you want adds the units that you have selected to the group and steals them out of any other group. So that's all for this one. I have this big other attack coming in. If these were not enough units already, then the rest should do it, but my opponent actually only has a whole bunch of probes. So that's the end of the game.